Okay, so because of now तो it started वहाँ ना network break हो जाता है. Hello everyone. So I think the people will start joining, so it will take another 5 to 7 minutes. So you can see on the window. So good afternoon everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on autoimmune liver disease. So since people are joining, so we'll start another 5 minutes. So Dr. Ajay Gupta with us today. Over to you, sir. You can give your introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Kanchan. Good afternoon to all. Myself, Dr. Ajay Gupta. I'm heading the Department of Hematology and Immunology at National Reference Lab, Dr. Lal's Path Lab, Rohini, Delhi. And previously, I was at SRL Reference Lab, Gurgaon. So we all know since past 2 years how this COVID pandemic has unforeseen with we see now Delta variant coming up. So it has been lots of COVID and COVID related webinars which have been scrolled over since past 2 years. And to switch off the mood to autoimmune, I thought that we need to have an autoimmune liver seminar. So this seminar will basically, it will be based on what all diseases we have in the liver, being one of the largest organ, and autoimmune liver disease is in focus. So how can we diagnose them? What are the diagnostic modalities we have? What all recent advances we have come up to? And what are the invasive and non-invasive modalities we have? And are there any specific investigations to reach to the diagnosis of autoimmune liver disease? So all these things will be talked about in next 1 hour. Apart from the normal presentation on autoimmune liver disease, I will be sharing some of the slides on the latest techniques which we are offering at Dr. Lal's Path Lab at the National Reference Lab in context to immunofluorescence and EBLOT. So these are the latest techniques, and I'm sure all the clinicians, all the pathologists, we all need to be aware on this. So can we start, Kanchan?
Yes, so we can start now. 66 people have joined, so we can
start. So to begin with, now we all know about autoimmune diseases. The loss of self-tolerance, which leads to the production of autoantibodies or the T cells, which reacts with their own antigens, and as a result, autoantibody is produced. Autoimmune diseases are basically divided into 2 types: organ-specific and systemic autoimmune disease. Systemic autoimmune disease, that means the antigens are distributed in many tissues, affecting whole of the body: lupus, systemic lupus, then rheumatoid arthritis, APS or the antiphospholipid syndrome, systemic sclerosis, Sjogren syndromes, vasculitis, and inflammatory myopathies, that is the dermatomyositis and polymyositis. So these are the group of diseases which are systemic autoimmune diseases. Now, organ specific, that means an autoimmune disease targeting the specific organ can be divided into thyroid, pancreas, kidney, blood, liver, skeletal muscles, and so on. Like in thyroid, we have Hashimoto's, we have got Graves. In pancreas, we have type 1 diabetes. In kidney, we have good pastures, autoimmune hemolytic anemia in the blood, and myasthenia gravis in the skeletal muscle. And this is the today's topic, liver. We will be focusing on autoimmune hepatitis, primary biliary cirrhosis, and sclerosing cholangitis. To start with autoimmune hepatitis, now this is a disease, is an unresolving inflammation of the liver of unknown cause. Now it was formerly known as chronic active hepatitis. It is characterized by elevation of liver transaminases. These are the SGOTs and the SGPTs. Presence of autoantibodies, we'll talk about in detail. Increased level of IgG or the gamma globulins. Presence of interface hepatitis on histopath. Histopath is the gold standard. The liver biopsy is the gold standard for the diagnosis of autoimmune liver disease. And we get a good response to corticosteroids. Now, how come these diseases occur? There are varied factors which interplay and results in autoimmune liver disease. For autoimmune hepatitis, we have got the genetic predisposition, the presence of HLA genes, HLA DRB1, 3, DRB1, 4, and when these genetic factors, they play a role, and often the prognosis is very poor, and there is a very poor response to corticosteroids. Also, there are environmental factors which lead to the loss of tolerance to T lymphocytes, which subsequently attack the hepatocyte. Very important to note that 10% of the cases, they overlap. That means the autoimmune hepatitis and the biliary cirrhosis, they overlap with each other. So it presents with a diagnostic challenge also, these overlap conditions. Now, for autoimmune hepatitis, the risk factors include, yes, as goes with every autoimmune disease, more commonly seen in females, ratio being 1:4 in favor of females, and exposure to herpes simplex virus, Epstein-Barr virus, hepatitis A, B, C. And yes, very important to know that the patient having a pre-existing autoimmune diseases like celiac disease, rheumatoid arthritis, and autoimmune thyroiditis. Now, these patients have a fair bit of chance of having autoimmune hepatitis. Yes, autoimmune hepatitis is also drug-induced. Drugs like minocycline, nitrofurantoin, halothane, atorvastatin, and isoniazid. Now, some important statistics. So, in 2015, when there were lots of studies which were conducted, which showed the prevalence of autoimmune hepatitis 1.3% among all the liver diseases and 8.74% among the chronic liver disease. 40% of the patients, when untreated, they die within 6 months of the diagnosis. Cirrhosis develops in at least 40% of the survivors. 54% of the patients, they develop esophageal varices within 2 years after cirrhosis. 20% of the individual with esophageal varices, they die of hemorrhage. Very important to note that 10% of the patients, they require liver transplant, and about 20 to 40% of the patient also have AIH, that's autoimmune hepatitis, post-liver transplant. So it's a matter of concern. And very important to note that 90% of the patients have pathological titers of at least one of the antibody, which we will be talking about. Now, there are various classifications. They are broadly divided into 3, type 1, type 2, and type 3. So type 1 autoimmune hepatitis is the most commonest. When we compare the type 1 and type 2, type 1 is more common, type 2 is less. Type 1 can occur at any age. Yes, type 2 is more often seen in children and young adults. And positive antibodies, yes, ASMA, that is anti-smooth muscle antibodies and anti-nuclear antibodies. And in type 2, we can see anti-LKM, that is the liver kidney microsomal antibodies, and anti-LC1, that is the liver cytosol antibodies. Yes, pre-existing other autoimmune diseases like celiac disease, rheumatoid, ulcerative colitis, Sjogren's. Yes, in type 2, patient may or may not have an other autoimmune disease. Type 1 is having a good response to corticosteroid therapy, but type 2 has a poor response. Type 1 is less severe and type 2 is more severe, and chances of relapse are more. Type 3 autoimmune hepatitis, it's characterized by the presence of, this is a very specific antibodies, anti-soluble liver antigens, also known as anti-SLA, and it affects mostly the young females, and type 3 rapidly progresses to cirrhosis. Clinical presentation, very important. It's a very, very variable presentations. Very important to know that 25% of the patients are asymptomatic. That means they will have no symptoms, but yes, when they will come up to the laboratory diagnosis, we will see a raised serum liver transaminases with leading to hepatic necrosis and fulminant liver failure. 1/3 of the patients are cirrhotic at the time of presentation. 30% of the patients, they mimic the features of viral hepatitis, and 50% of patients have got other autoimmune disease. Now we come to the approach. How will we approach? Now you can see that elevation of chronic transaminases are seen, and we have to exclude other things like hepatitis B, A, and C, Wilson's disease, hemochromatosis, and we go to specific antibodies like ANA, AMA, ASMA, and all. And if these all are negative, then unlikely there is a autoimmune hepatitis. And if it is positive, the titers are strong, then likely the patient is having an autoimmune hepatitis. Titers are more than equal to 1:80. So this is a flow chart which helps us to conclude whether the patient is suffering from some sort of an autoimmune liver disease. Yes, this is the diagnosis of autoimmune hepatitis. How can we go? The SGOT, SGOPT is raised 5 to 10 times. IgG levels is high. Positive ANA, ASMA, LKM. Then yes, if the patient is a female, we need to suspect all the viral hepatitis markers are negative and the alcohol consumption is less than 25 milligram per day, and the patient has not undergone any hepatotoxic drugs therapy. So role of serum transaminases, yes, there is a significant increase in SGOT, SGPT with normal ALP. That is very important. Then if there is elevation of ALP but a normal serum transaminases, which is very unusual, then we should raise the suspicion of either the patient is having biliary cirrhosis or sclerosing cholangitis. IgG is specific to all the three. It is raised in serum. IgG is raised in autoimmune hepatitis, sclerosing cholangitis, and biliary cirrhosis. So these are the battery of autoantibodies which help us to conclude whether the patient is having autoimmune hepatitis or not. These are the ANA. ANA stands for anti-nuclear antibodies, anti-smooth muscle, anti-mitochondrial. Anti-mitochondrial is very specific for primary biliary cirrhosis. LKM is very specific for type 2 hepatitis. ANCA also for type 3 and type 1. Soluble liver antigen for type 3. So we have got different techniques. These all antibodies we are doing via the immunofluorescence. Now these are the prevalence of autoantibodies which are associated with autoimmune hepatitis. You can clearly see that if you are seriously suspecting a case of autoimmune hepatitis, then first antibody choice for prescribing is anti-smooth muscle antibody. That is seen in 40 to 90% of the cases. Of course, ANA being the screening test for all the autoimmune disease, it has to be seen, and it is there in 5 to 70% of the cases. And anti-SLA, soluble liver antigen, seen in 10 to 30% of the cases. In type 2, as discussed earlier, LKM, LC1, and you can say SLA. So SLA is a part of both type 1 and type 2. Now we see that the histopaths, the liver biopsy is the gold standard. But what we see in histopath is the interface hepatitis and the periportal plasma cell infiltration. You can see in these two photographs, you can see the plasma cell infiltration is there. So histopath is the gold standard. But yes, if your autoantibodies are positive, clinically the patient is going towards autoimmune liver disease. And I think in patients having you can say pre-existing autoimmune disease, then you can seriously think about, and the autoantibodies, they really help to establish the diagnosis. Now, this is a revised international autoimmune hepatitis system. Now, you can see there are the scores which are given. Scores in context to female gender, then what is the ratio of SGOT, SGPT, then how much is your IgG raised, then what is your AMA and ASMA titers, then if the patient is having some drugs, alcohol, or the patient has undergone liver biopsy, then antimitochondrial hepatitis A and B. So these are all the markers which are being kept in a suspected case of a autoimmune liver disease, especially autoimmune hepatitis. Now we calculate this score. If the score is more than equal to 15, then we can surely say that the patient is having autoimmune hepatitis. And if the score is between 10 to 15, then we can say yes, probably the patient is having autoimmune hepatitis. And if the score is less than 10, there's less likely the patient is having autoimmune hepatitis. So what are the diagnostic difficulties we face or the diagnostic challenges? So if the patients, there are patients, 10 to 20% of the patients are there who have anti-smooth muscle negative antibodies. So in such cases, yes, liver biopsy is there, and other antibody like ANCA, we can go for an ANCA. Yes, patients with viral hepatitis, 20 to 40% with chronic HCV are positive. Now this is very important. Patients with autoimmune hepatitis have false anti-HCV antibodies. That means we can be mistaken if we go for a hepatitis C antibodies and we are getting a high titer. That means they can be falsely raised in the cases of autoimmune hepatitis 2. Now, how can we rule out this? That we need to go for a HCV RNA. In such cases, the HCV RNA would be negative despite the antibodies, which are falsely raised in autoimmune hepatitis. Now we come to biliary cirrhosis. Now this is a chronic cholestatic liver disease of autoimmune origin, and it is seen with other autoimmune diseases also. 90% seen in women, usually seen in 5 to 7 decades. 50 to 60% are asymptomatic. Very important, if a single antibody which needs to be prescribed for the diagnosis of biliary cirrhosis is antimitochondrial antibody, and it is seen in 90% of the cases it is positive. This we are doing via immunofluorescence. So for ASMA, if one single antibody, which is most commonly seen, is the anti-smooth muscle antibody, and for biliary cirrhosis, one single antibody which can be prescribed is the antimitochondrial antibody. But we have got a whole diagnostic panel with us. The importance of that panel is that there are cases in which you are not getting anti-smooth muscle or antimitochondrial antibody positive. The better is to go for a panel. Yes, you get a complete picture whether the patient is having autoimmune hepatitis, biliary sclerosis, or cholangitis. Other autoantibodies which Dr. Lal's Path Lab and we are offering are the GP210, which is 99% specific for PBC, and other antibodies like SP100, PML, and other antibodies which are seen in 30% of the cases. Diagnostic criteria for PBC is, there are 3 parameters: antimitochondrial antibody positivity, alkaline phosphatase is raised, and then liver biopsy. So out of these 3, any 2 criteria needs to be fulfilled to stamp the diagnosis of primary biliary cirrhosis. Now coming up to cholangitis, it's a chronic cholestatic chronic liver disease which is characterized by inflammation and fibrosis of both intrahepatic as well as extrahepatic bile ducts, which leads to the formation of multifocal bile duct strictures. There are strictures. So when there are strictures, which is the liver serum liver enzymes which is raised? It's alkaline phosphatase. Now many patients are asymptomatic with no physical abnormalities at the time of presentations, and 60 to 80% of the patients have got a concomitant other autoimmune disease, commonly is the ulcerative colitis. Now, how to diagnose cholangitis? Elevation of alkaline phosphatase, which is disproportional to SGOT-SGPT ratio. Then serum biochemical test, which indicates cholestasis. Then IgG levels. Both serum bilirubin and ALP may be normal initially, but when the disease progresses, both the levels shoot up. Now, these are the various autoantibodies which are present in sclerosing cholangitis. That you can see ANCA up to 80%, ANA 77%, smooth muscle just 20%, endothelial cell antibody 35%, and so on. So this is a very important flow chart. It's an approach to the diagnosis of sclerosing cholangitis, that if we have got a cholestatic biochemical profile, we can go for an ultrasound, we can go for an anti-mitochondrial antibody. Now then, if AMA is negative, fine, we can go for a MRCP. Is normal, we go for a liver biopsy. MRCP is positive, then diagnostic of large duct sclerosis. And if MRCP is non-diagnostic, then we have got other diagnostic modalities also. So when we see, now how should we approach to a patient whom we suspect to have an autoimmune liver disease? We should go for an autoimmune liver disease panel. And in these panels, we have got many antibodies. Prominently are the ANA, SM, M2, LKM, GP100, 210 and all. So then we have got a specific flow chart. If they are positive, we need to segregate. If smooth muscle is positive, then it is a type 1 hepatitis. If LKM1 is positive, it is type 2 hepatitis. If anti-mitochondrial M2 or AMA is positive, then it is a primary biliary cirrhosis. If it is anti-soluble liver antigen, it is positive, then we can think about type 3 also. Now, how do we detect these? And these are the various antibody panels which we are doing at Dr. Lal's Path Lab, the National Defense Lab. There are a battery of antibodies. You can see AMA we are doing, SP100 we are doing, PML, LKM, LC1. So two techniques are followed. This is a blot method. This is a blot method in which the antigen strips are coated, and we put the patient's serum in it, and it is incubated, and subsequently we see the intensity of the bands are there. Then these are the test panels which we are offering. Complete range of autoimmune liver profile we are offering. Now, the diagnostic panel which we offer is the qualitative determination of human autoantibodies to 9 antigens. This is a panel. This is a blot panel. So in blot panel, we are doing anti-mitochondrial, M2, SP100, PML, then GP210, LKM1, LC1, SLA, RO52. Apart from these autoantibodies, which we are doing via blot, we are also doing ANA, ASMA, and AMA via immunofluorescence. So the principle of this technique is that the test strips are coated with parallel line of purified antigens. These are incubated with patient serum. Now, if they contain antibodies, IgG, IgA, IgM, they will bind to that site. Then we will conjugate, and then we will add a substrate. Adding the substrate will impart a color to that test band. Now, the reading of that test band is not taken by the naked eye. It is taken by the software which is there inside the machine. It's all automated. And the intensity of the test band is compared with the intensity of the control band, and the final reading is given. So, to conclude for autoimmune liver disease, the determination of numerous autoantibodies against liver-specific antigens is indispensable for the diagnosis of ALD. Now, we need to absolutely exclude viral hepatitis, hepatitis resulting from various infection, drug-induced, alcohol, metabolic liver disease, hereditary disease, and there's a very important thing that 90% of the autoimmune hepatitis patients have at least one autoantibody positive. The autoantibody test panel which we are offering has a sensitivity of 94% and a specificity of 99% for autoimmune liver disease. As per study, 94% of the patients with biliary cirrhosis had at least one antibody out of these. Either it is AMA, M2, SP100, PML, or GP20. So this portrays the importance of diagnostic panel. The clinician, now we must realize that when a single antibody is negative, then we need to go for a diagnostic panel, or else we can straight away go for a diagnostic panel if we are in terms of thinking seriously that the patient might be having an autoimmune liver disease. So what is the future? What are the recent advances which has happened? There's a new antibody under evaluation. This is known as ASGR1, that is anti-asialo-glycoprotein receptor antibodies. It's an upcoming antibody marker which can be used to detect ALD, and the method is ELISA. The studies are still going on, and we may see its diagnostic utility in terms of sensitivity and specificity in near future. So now I will be portraying some of the diagnostic techniques that at National Reference Lab, how we are able to identify these antibodies, the ASMAs, the AMAs and all. So you can see from this part that this is a portion of stomach. This is the portion of stomach. We have got parietal cells, we have got the chief cells, and we have got the smooth muscles. Very important to understand that this is a stomach tissue and this is the kidney tissue which we are using. Now, kidney tissue is inside and stomach tissue is outside. You can see which cells. These are the parietal cells. This is the smooth muscle layer. This is the muscle layer. This is the kidney tissue. In kidney tissues, you can see the DCTs, the PCTs, and the glomerulus. You can see. So we have a stomach tissue and we have a kidney tissue. The stomach tissue is wrapped around the kidney tissue. So stomach tissue is outside and the kidney tissue is inside. Now, how we diagnose? That's very important. Now you can see these are the parietal cells. These are the chief cells. This is a smooth muscle. And in kidney, we have got, it's divided into cortex and medulla. In the cortex, we are seeing the glomeruli. In the medulla, we can see all the distal convoluted tubules. Now, we need to see the fluorescence in both of these. How it comes? Now, this is an example of anti-smooth muscle antibody positivity. You can see that the stomach portion, the parietal cells and the chief cells, they are dark. And you can see an apple green fluorescence in the smooth muscle. Wherever the smooth muscle is there, inside of blood vessels or in the layer of the stomach, it is showing an apple green fluorescence. That means this patient is having a anti-smooth muscle antibody positivity. Now, we are doing via immunofluorescence microscopy. Now you can see this. This is very important. You can see the parietal cells of the stomach are giving the fluorescence. These are the parietal cells. So parietal cells are positive. But yes, beach mein aap dekhiye in the middle, it is the smooth muscle which is negative. It is absolutely dark. And you can see the convoluted tubules, the renal tubules, they are all giving apple green fluorescence. So that is anti-mitochondrial antibody positivity via immunofluorescence, which is seen in or diagnostic of primary biliary cirrhosis. So you can see clearly that the parietal cells in the stomach layer are positive, the smooth muscles is negative, and then the convoluted tubules in the kidney are also giving fluorescence. So this is AMA positivity. On corresponding ANA, there's a typical cytoplasmic pattern which is seen. This black portion inside is the nucleus, which is absolutely dark. This is the cytoplasm, which is giving an apple green fluorescence. So on ANA, we get a cytoplasmic pattern. which raises a suspicion that the patient might be suffering from an autoimmune liver disease. Subsequently, we go for a AMA and ASMA, and we have to evaluate like this. And yes, but if all these are negative, then we need to think about the autoimmune liver disease panel in terms of SP100, GP210, PMLs and all. So there are lots and lots of patterns which are very important. Again, you can see this is also a smooth muscle antibody positivity. You can see absolutely the muscle layer. This is the smooth muscle layer of the stomach, which is giving the fluorescence. The parietal cells are negative. The convoluted tubules are negative. Again, so ASMA positivity, likely the patient is suffering from an autoimmune hepatitis. Again, you can see the smooth muscles. You can even see the smooth muscle in the blood vessels. These are also shining. Everywhere in the tissue section, wherever the smooth muscles will be there, it will be giving an apple green fluorescence, which will pinpoint towards an anti-smooth muscle antibody positivity. Very important, LKM. Now, LKM, liver kidney microsomal antibody, we are doing both via immunofluorescence as via blood. Now, you can see this portion. This is the parietal cells. The parietal cells are negative. The smooth muscle cells are negative. But you can see these are the PCT only. PCT are the proximal convoluted tubules. These are giving fluorescence. And even the DCT is negative. So when PCT is positive, DCT is negative, smooth muscles is negative, parietal cells is negative, then we have a LKM. And LKM is for type 2 autoimmune hepatitis. These are the high power, you can see. These are the cytoplasmic cells and these are the reticulin cells. You can see the high power view. So you can see the smooth muscles, how they shine. They are giving absolute, this is a very strong titer. We serially dilute the serum samples starting from 1:20, 1:40, 80. We go up to a serial double dilutions till the endpoint titer is reached. So thank you very much. I conclude my presentation on autoimmune liver disease. So this was an hands-on for automation in IFA we have got, and we have got blood techniques. We have got full diagnostic panel with us apart from immunofluorescence and blood. So we can conclude we can come to some sort of conclusion if the sample is sent to us, whether the patient is suffering from some sort of autoimmune liver disease or not. And yes, we can even conclude whether the patient is having autoimmune hepatitis, cholangitis or biliary cirrhosis. Thank you. If there are any questions.
Yeah. So team, now we are open for questions. You can use the chat board and write your questions on the chat board, and then Dr. Ajay will be answering your questions. So you can start writing your questions on the chat board now. Thank you, sir, for such an elaborative presentation. I think marker-wise, you have cleared many of our doubts. Yeah. I think team has get a very good insight about all the markers and how to go about different panels for autoimmune liver disorders. So now we'll see what questions arise, and then yeah, there's one question from Dr. Rachita. Okay, no question. Very informative and simplified for understanding and inference in clinical practice. So there's a question, anything new we are going to start in autoimmune liver disorder?
So I had shared the slide for this ASGPR, anti-asialoglycoprotein. This is a new antibody which is under evaluation, and studies are going on. And if the sensitivity and specificity comes good, this is 95 to 99%, yes, it will be another antibody in terms of an armor in our battery of investigation which we are offering for autoimmune liver disease.
Okay, and there's one more question. Does the doctor has to mention specific antibodies for testing?
They can write autoimmune liver panel also. Straight away they can write autoimmune liver panel, or they can write anti-smooth muscle antibody, anti-mitochondrial antibody, and LT-LKM. 3 antibodies which they can write, or they can directly offer a panel. We have got the diagnostic panel also.
Okay, so there's one question. ANCA by ELISA or by IFA, which is better method? As many times doctor asks for ELISA specifically.
Oh yes, that's a very good question, and I must say that according to American College of Rheumatology and the standard guidelines, ANCA should be performed by both the techniques, IFA and ELISA. If MPO is positive, then PANCA is positive. If CNCA is positive, then PR3 on ELISA is positive. So if both IF and ELISA are positive, then the diagnostic sensitivity and specificity of ANCA is raised. So I feel the dual test for both IFA and ELISA must be done for ANCA.
Okay. Okay, so there's a question. There's a one question, but the person is asking for codes. Okay, we'll share it separately. I'll separately circulate the codes. Any other questions? So if there's any other questions, you can use the chat board, or otherwise we'll end the session. I'll share the video script with all of you. You can share it with your clinicians, and you can also go through, if you want to go through the presentation again, you can again listen to that video. We'll also put this video to all social media sites also. So you can share the link to your doctors from there also. So team, any other questions? Any other questions if you have?
Kanchan, this is the panel. This is the slide I've shared.
Yeah, right.
So for immunofluorescence, these are the test codes, and for line immunoassay, we have this codes.
Okay, so whosoever is asking for the codes, you can take the click of the slide. So the codes are clearly mentioned over here, and I'll also recirculate these codes on the mail itself, so that you'll have a note of it. So there's one more question. So to screen for autoimmune, we should go by ANA, by ELISA, or by IFA?
By IFA. For ANA, American College of Rheumatology says that still IF is the gold standard. Why? Because not only we are able to see the intensity, but the specific pattern points towards a specific autoimmune disease. For example, in autoimmune liver disease also, if we are getting a cytoplasmic or a cytoplasmic fibrillar pattern, very likely that the patient might be suffering from an autoimmune liver disease. But on the contrary, ELISA just gives a numerical value beyond the cutoff. Which is the pattern? What is the intensity? Nothing is given. If it is a homogeneous typical pattern, yes, patient might be suffering from lupus. So ANA, IFA far ahead than ELISA.
Or we can also go by ANA reflex to ENA.
Yes, ANA reflex to ENA must be done. Again, the titers are very significant. If the titers are more than equal to 160, 1:160, that is as per international guidelines, then we must go for a reflex ENA, that is the extractable nuclear antigens.
Right. Okay, sir. I think there's no more questions, so we can end the session right here.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for joining the session. So I'll recirculate the video as well as the summary of the session so that you can have a gist of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.